The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Welcome to the podcast on Tuesday, the 10th of November 2020. On the podcast today, Vadim Alexandre, Head of Healthcare at SP Angel, discusses Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, COVID tested stocks, including Novacyt, and we also mention Polarean Imaging. Also on the podcast, Glen Goodman, former ITV News Business correspondent and now the author of Crypto Trader, covers this week's Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency news. We also talk about the American election and the vaccine as well. Big news, massive news yesterday, so we talk about it with both guests. Plus, as always, at the end of the podcast, I've got two lists for you. The top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours and the top 5 most liked RNSs. Now, you can see both these lists, in fact, top 10 versions of these lists at voxmarkets.co.uk. We'll also see lots of other content. There's an article there on Manlet Partners sees H1 revenue skyrocket by 153%. And there's a COVID-19 index, of course. Big falls yesterday on that index. And a few big falls today. In fact, fusion antibodies, they are up 13% to 130 is the biggest rise today. And the biggest faller, they're still down this. Omega, N4 Pharma, Open Orphan, which is not a COVID stock really. Synergin, Gene Drive and Way Education all falling. In fact, Way Education is the biggest drop of the day. It's down 15% to 23.50. Check that out at voxmarkets.co.uk.
Vox Markets is an online community of investors that runs a free mobile and desktop platform that allows you to track news and updates about any UK-listed company, offering RNS push notifications, detailed charts, pricing data, and much more. Find out more at voxmarkets.co.uk/app.
And joining me on the podcast right now is Vadim Alexandre, Head of Healthcare at SP Angel. You all right, fella?
How you doing, Justin?
Massive day yesterday, wasn't it? Huge!
Absolutely. Very big day.
I mean, the thing is, we knew this was coming out. I thought mid-November that Pfizer was due out, but they obviously did it early. Trump's blaming them, saying you deliberately delayed this after the election already. He's got such an ego. But it is massive news. And do you know what? That's annoying, though. And there are a lot of people, of course, COVID tested stocks have been very popular amongst private investors. And a lot of them are just downplaying this vaccine. And I think, well, hang on. Okay, listen. First and foremost, a vaccine is a lifesaver for people of a certain age and of a certain condition. So when they say they're not going to take it because it's not safe, it's not for them. We can't open up the economy until we can protect these older people and these vulnerable people. So once we get that, and I know the vaccine's minus 80 degrees, it's going to be logistically very hard to distribute and all that stuff. But this is one of many. Like I said, isn't there? There's 180 vaccines out there, isn't there, being developed? 9 by big companies, and it's all coming in the next month or so. So I think the tide is turning, and we saw sentiment. You can't ignore the market. Sentiment towards COVID testing stocks took a massive hit yesterday.
Absolutely. And you said this, Justin. You were saying this. And
they may rally.
It's arrived.
They may rally, they may bounce, but I genuinely think now the tide has turned a little bit, and we are seeing the vaccine tide coming in, the COVID testing tide going out slowly. Like I said, like waves, it'll come in and out a little bit, but I think we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and so vaccines are the new hot stocks, whatever, and COVID testing stocks. Sadly, the trend, I think, is not their friend now,
Yeah, well, it's hard to ignore that reality. I mean, you mentioned it many times. So you called the sentiment on vaccines. So the minute we would start getting positive news on vaccines, testing stocks would get hit. So I never disagreed with you. I think the main point on testing stocks is what we've always said, actually, is that there are those that there's really one that's there and delivering today, and the cash is being generated from the sale of these tests, and that's Novacyt. Versus the ones that haven't launched anything yet, or are just starting to launch things, or have the promise of agreements, or have small agreements in place. Those stocks, I have to say, are the ones that are going to be hit the hardest, and it'll be a sustained hit. I can't help but think, because exactly as you say, the news that's coming is more vaccines are going to be there'll be more positive news coming, surely, from other vaccines. But I guess that's it. I guess the point being is that the sentiment is changing.
Yeah, exactly. Someone asked me yesterday, said, COVID stocks. I said, Novacyt are fine. They've earned a tump lot of cash. They've really done they're king of COVID testing stocks. But what people don't understand is people keep arguing that testing will be here for 6-12 months. Yes, it will. But you understand the market's about sentiment as well. And we now know there's a shelf life on these COVID stocks pretty much. And we sort of knew that beforehand, but when the vaccine was there, and it came in 90, of course, they haven't tested certain age groups, but 90% efficacy, a lot higher than they thought, I think, because the seasonal flu vaccine is around about 40 to 60. So, as yet, it's looking good. Safety, they tested I think 40,000 people, so half a placebo, 20,000 people have taken the vaccine, no safety issues at all, efficacy at 90%. There's going to be issues with distribution, of course, but now we know there's one out there and we can actually knock this vaccine on the head sooner or later. That time limit has become into full focus now. We're realising, hang on, it's coming. COVID tested stocks have a shelf life on them, and it's there. It's coming quicker, And so it's sentiment.
Definitely.
People understand sentiment. That's it.
Absolutely. So, and the key being that the COVID stocks that are delivering today were the ones that are capturing the moment, and the ones that are about the future, well, that future is becoming shorter and shorter, right? Mm-hmm. So I can't help but think, Novacyt, we've discussed, is generating, a large amount of cash right now. That's underpinning, part of its valuation, and the question you have to ask is, how long, based on this first vaccine, how long do we think that peak testing will continue? I still think, well into 2021, probably well into the year. And the reason for that is even just this vaccine, for example, the current estimate, now admittedly, this is all early days, right? It just was announced yesterday. And let's not forget, this is an interim, these are interim results in their trial, right? There's every reason to believe that, the final results will still be good. So I'm not trying to knock the vaccine. I'm just saying, we're not quite there fully so there's work to be done still on the trial. Then there's the whole rollout. Now, the estimates in the UK are currently that the most highest risk patients or highest risk strata of the population will start to receive the vaccine in April, here in the UK. So it gives you a flavor so that means mass rollout. So like as in, for the masses is going to take months and months after that. So it's all, broadly speaking, within the timelines we had always discussed, into 21, you can almost call 2021 a full year of testing, where it starts to drop off a little bit in the second half. And then it'll drop off to a new normal. And the question then becomes, a stock like Novacyt, I think, will benefit it is benefiting throughout the whole process, right? Yeah. And then it's a question of what the new normal will be, because remember we were saying how, regardless of a vaccine, you still need to know, by the way, you also need to know whether your vaccine is working in a real world scenario as opposed to in a clinical trial, right? Mm-hmm. So there's need for testing for that as well. So, my view, just to keep it simple, I'm still, Novacyt is going to be fine. The other stocks I'd be a bit more careful with, Avacta, Gene Drive, Omega Diagnostics. These are companies that I would say are more at risk. Because they're just not generating the income yet, and by the time they do, this might all be indeed over for them because they haven't embedded themselves in the testing environment. Whereas someone like Novacyt will be is fully embedded already, and will benefit from the long-term new normal of testing because they'll be established within the system. You know what I mean? So, for example, like their PCR machines in hospitals, right? Those machines could be used for a panel of respiratory tests, like we were discussing before. Not just testing COVID, flu, and other types of respiratory viruses. So other coronaviruses, for example. That's the new normal I foresee in 22 and onwards. We are going to be testing, at a whole new level, at a higher level. But maybe not at the peak levels that we're testing today. That I agree. That wave is going to go through.
Yeah.
So,
And there'll be days where these testing stocks will really rally. And but listen, overall, I think the trend is down here slowly. It'll take a while. It'll take a while.
Yeah.
You know. Well, China didn't get, which is a bit silly, I thought. And I suppose it's not really silly. But Polarian's rallied strongly of late, and it sold off yesterday because of this announcement of vaccine. And I thought people are missing the point here. First of all, the market that Polarean will address is massive anyway. Without COVID, pre-COVID, it was massive. COVID added to the market because there's long COVID affecting lungs, of course. But people's lungs are still going to be affected, because of COVID. And it's like, but it's sold off. And I thought, well, it's a bit silly, really, because I just think, the market hasn't changed. The size of their market opportunity hasn't changed at all,
So let's call it across the board. There's something that I would label the COVID premium. So that's, just took a big hit yesterday. Yeah. Some stocks far less than others because it represents a far less, proportion of their business opportunity. So I'd say Polarian, in Polarian's case, they've dropped about 10%. Call that their COVID premium. I mean, they rallied, from they were only 70p 2 weeks ago, rallied to 80p and came back down to 70p, Mm-hmm. So I think that's the end of, that, put it that way. That's the end of it there. You never know, obviously it could drift a bit further. But my point being is, in terms of COVID in relation to COVID, because of exactly what you just said, Polarean is it's about a lung imaging technology that wasn't developed for COVID. You know what I mean? It wasn't their core business at all, But other stocks like Synergen, for example, completely centered on COVID and have taken it's been a bloodbath. Their stock is now 90p. It was they just raised 80 million at 175p only a month or 2 months ago. So it is there's a big differential in terms of the COVID premium. And you're right, sentiment is turning now, and it's moving away from diagnostics, certainly the more speculative diagnostics, the ones that are less speculative, like Novacyt. I really do kind of I see that one is still working throughout this very well. Why? Because just clock the monthly cash returns. That's all you need to know. You know what I mean? With Novacyt, the only thing you need to know is watch the cash, monthly. And you're right. Sentiment around it will change for all the other stocks. That one I think will remain a winner throughout this. But in terms of the COVID premium, look at all these stocks and see how much of their story has centered on COVID, and you'll see their shares have reacted. I was quite surprised, almost quite accurately proportionate to how much COVID represents of their business. Yeah. Polarian's a good example. It's had a rally more recently. It's popped in the last 2 months roughly, but it's gone even higher more recently, and maybe that was on some COVID speculation. That's corrected, and we're back to normal. Some of the big COVID stories, like the Synergens of this world, I still think there's some correction there to be had. I think they're going to continue re-rating. And the ones you mentioned, the sentiment against some of the more speculative testing stocks, Avacta, Omega, Gene Drive, there's some corrections there that are still going to continue. And as more news flow comes in about positive news flow about vaccines, which is very good, we're all happy about that. But, it's going to be COVID negative for COVID stocks. Yeah,
absolutely. Marvellous stuff. Excellent stuff, Vadim, as always. And hopefully we'll catch up in the not too distant future. I'll probably speaking next week. Yeah?
Thanks, Justin.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite.
And joining me on the podcast right now is Glen Goodman. He's the Scrappy-Doo of crypto trading. Sorry, we were just talking about Scrappy-Doo and how annoying he was. Scooby-Doo is fine, and Scrappy-Doo came along, a little obnoxious dog, thinking he could beat up the world. And I don't see it went downhill after he arrived on the scene. Really annoying, wasn't he?
It was amazingly annoying. I was only a little kid at the time, so I was annoying myself, but he was too much even for me.
Yeah, I mean, if kids are very annoying, and I've got two of them, they're so annoying. They don't hear annoying sounds they make, they bang stuff, they don't even know. Stop that, it's annoying. Do you notice? They won't even notice that. And so if a kid finds a little cartoon dog annoying, the producers have got it wrong, and they got it massively wrong. But obviously, Glen is not the Scrappy-Doo of trading, but because it took Glen years of study and trial and error to become a consistent money maker. Shake your money maker, shake your money thing.
That's right.
He learned his
I'm more
trading.
like the Velma.
Hang on, let me finish this. Yes. He learned his trading lessons the hard way. Oh, did you, Glenn? Oh, I don't want to delve into that. It sounds quite painful.
Oh, I see. You're still reading off the back of my book.
So you don't have to. So you don't have to. With the crypto trader by your side, it's by my side. You'll learn how to grab opportunities, make money, and keep it.
That's
It's very important there. I go right by my side. I use it as a pillow as well. Hopefully it'll just seep into my head, all the knowledge in that book, by osmosis overnight.
Well, you've had it for a year now, and it still doesn't seem to have quite sunk in. So yeah, you should probably
Good job.
Probably give it another go.
Anyway, listen, yesterday we had a massive news. Huge news. Huge. Now, people, let me just say something. I want to just say something here, all right?
Yeah.
There are investors questioning the safety of Pfizer's vaccine, say they wouldn't take it. They're missing the point. You people are missing the point completely. The economy is in lockdown. Do you understand why it's in lockdown? You people listening out there, I wouldn't take it. And invariably, these people are invested in COVID testing stocks, which took a hammering yesterday on the news anyway. Because, listen, the economy's in lockdown because hospitals have been filling up with people with the virus. It affects them adversely, These are elderly people with vulnerable health conditions and all that stuff. So, to stop the infection spreading, the economy has been shut down. If a vaccine can prevent these vulnerable people catching the virus, our healthcare systems won't be shut down. So, the young and healthy, the people out there saying, I wouldn't take it, you don't need to take it. You don't need. Now, if the difference is you dying of this virus or a vaccine with 90% at the moment efficacy, you taking that, you'd probably take the vaccine. If it's death or the vaccine, and the vaccine, by the way, has been tested and now it's 40,000 people altogether, so placebo for half it, 20,000 people have been tested, no safety concerns. The only concerns are efficacy, it's 90%. Now, if you're going to die if you catch the virus or take the vaccine, what would you actually do? I'm not talking about a young, healthy trader on Twitter who's into COVID stocks. I'm talking about someone who literally can't leave the house because they're terrified of the virus killing them. What would you do, Glenn, if you were in that position?
If I was terrified, yeah, I would take it. You can imagine these people trying to ban the vaccine because of the effect that it will have on COVID testing stocks.
On their stocks, yeah. Destroy
the COVID testing economy, for heaven's sake.
I know, and these people are saying, well, I wouldn't. Hang on a second. You are a Twitter investor, you're on ramping stocks on Twitter, and you are giving me your opinion. You think it's worth more than the CEO of AstraZeneca or Pfizer or Moderna and the tests that they put in there. You think that's worth more to me? Do you? Get a grip, people. We need to open up the economy properly. Now, seasonal flu efficacy is between 40 and 60%. That's all.
Yeah.
This is 90%. Okay, it's early doors, but I don't think they expected as good a result as this early doors anyway. So this is good.
I guess, I mean, the idea is anybody who's vulnerable would do the calculus where they would work out, okay, so it's a brand new vaccine. It hasn't been tested over the long term. It could well be dangerous over the long term, have bad long-term side effects. But if you're, 70, 80 years old and, you have to kind of weigh up in your head, well, my risk of actually either dying or having very serious consequences from getting COVID are pretty high. Whereas the long-term risks, when you're already 70, 80 years old,
or you've got health conditions,
or you got vaccine are sort of less important than they would be if you were 20 years old.
Or if you've got a health condition as well. Some people are literally, have cancer or something like that, and they're terrified to catch it. Absolutely terrified.
So they should be. So they should take the vaccine.
And so of course, I mean, and that will then, stop these people, having to go to hospital, which will not cripple our NHS. That means then we can, go about our normal day, not worry about the virus being spread or, get infected other people, because there's a vaccine out there that will stop the NHS shutting down. That's the whole point of why the economy shut down. So, it's like I said, the first lot of, sort of vaccines, doses will only go to the vulnerable and the NHS workers, which makes... But as soon as they're vaccinated, we can pretty much go back to normal. And then over time, maybe we'll need it, or as you get older, you'll need it. But there's no rush for other people, because it seems like, if you look at the stats, largely you're not affected below the age of 75 relatively healthy, or 70, so it's not about this. So I think people are missing the point. Anyway, did Bitcoin, did anything happen to Bitcoin yesterday when the rally in Pfizer, it was announced by Pfizer, this good news?
Interestingly, surprisingly little happened to Bitcoin.
Really?
Bitcoin has been on a strong rally now for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's performing beautifully, while every other market that I trade has been all over the place, particularly yesterday, of course, where we saw that massive rise in the S&P 500 and the FTSE 100 and the other indices, and then almost a crash by the end of the day, which was just so confusing for traders and investors yesterday. Whereas Bitcoin, it had a little up and down yesterday, but nothing much. It's really still very much in a kind of bullish looking formation at the moment. It looks to me like it's on the cusp of another breakout. I mean, whether that breakout happens or not, who knows? You never know. But the pattern has formed. It's at the top of a trading range. It's looking like it's eager to break out at the moment. Ethereum, likewise, it hasn't performed as well as Bitcoin over this run, but it too has formed a little triangle pattern that looks like it wants to break out upwards. Another one that I bought was Wi-Fi. I bought that yesterday. Which
Wi-Fi is free.
Is spelt the letter Y.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because
it's
not free. I pay for I pay Sky, but I generally you can get free Wi-Fi. But obviously that's not the cryptocurrency, is it?
No. But anyway, this one broke out early this morning. I had a buy order in the market, so it triggered while I was asleep, and it's well into profit now, which is always a nice thing to wake up to.
Look at Glenn, he's making money while he sleeps. Oh yeah, I just roll over. I roll over in cash, basically a bed of cash, and I sleep cash, and I make cash while I sleep.
Well, no, I didn't know that cash was good. Yeah, as you say, I made it while I was asleep, so I rolled over in bed, and I was like, what's this lump I've just bumped into? And it was a big pile of cash that had just been deposited to me.
Yeah.
All going well in the world of crypto, apart from all the other cryptos. Sorry, I probably should have mentioned that while Bitcoin has been rallying so strongly, unusually the other cryptos have not followed. Usually they just slavishly go wherever Bitcoin goes, but actually they all did rather badly over recent weeks. There's a tentative recovery going on now amongst many of them, which is often, I guess that often used to be the case with Bitcoin. You'd get a big Bitcoin boost, and then all the other cryptos would kind of follow days or weeks later. And but that hasn't happened for a while. Anyway, that's what's going on right now.
Yeah. Let me just go back to Pfizer one thing. I know there's lots of hurdles yet to go on that. They haven't tested it out on the people. They have to store the actual doses minus 80, so that's going to prove to be logistically difficult in dispensing that. They'll get around that though, but this is just a first. Moderna's going to come out with a similar technology, so that's pretty new. Well, AstraZeneca and other doses don't need to be stored like that. So this is just I just think technology is amazing now in science, and they're figuring how it works. And it's a wave. This is one of the first waves of many positive vaccine waves. I think the tide is coming in here, and I think you're not going to stop science beating this. Full stop. So people will think, people are slamming Pfizer. They haven't been tested. They can't distribute it. It's probably not that effective. It's probably not safe. Listen, this is just the first of many. There's 180 vaccine trials going on, and there's 9 by big respectable companies with lots of money, deep pockets, and in fact money being lent to them apart from Pfizer by the Warp Speed Committee. So it's going to get there. It's going to get there. Definitely science and ingenuity will win out, I think.
Yeah. I agree. Things are happening now.
The trend is your friend. There's a trend.
We're on the home straight.
Yeah. And the trend is your friend. Start realising that the stocks have been hammered, and I said this back in September, the stocks have been hammered in the leisure sector will start to have a re-rate. It won't be straight up, of course, because there'll be worries, there'll be setbacks probably with some vaccines, and they'll sell off again probably. But generally, I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to head in back to normal. Pretty much.
I mean, it is interesting to look at international consolidated airlines, which rose so strongly yesterday. It rose about 40% yesterday. So I was just looking at that figure this morning.
10% a day. Wow.
Thinking, it must be doing so well when you look at it on a chart. You look at it on a chart, and it's on a daily chart, so you've got a couple of years of data on there. Well, pretty much all. Let's see. Yeah, a couple of years of data, and it still looks like it's been absolutely hammered, even after that 40% rise. That's how far it fell. So, you could look at that in one or two ways. A trend follower like me might look at it and go, well, it's still in a downtrend despite that massive rise yesterday. I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't get it now. It'll have a pullback. Listen, there'll be days where we'll get no more news on the vaccine. Then people start looking into the Pfizer vaccine, saying, well, look, logistics are hard to distribute that amount, and we won't get that many by this time. So we'll have a pullback there. But I genuinely think now, like you said, we're starting the home run here, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, exactly. I was going to go on to say, on the other hand, what you could look at it as a technical trader, you might look at it and say, well, actually, there was a crescendo of selling at the bottom, which was about, for IAG, I'm talking about, this was about a month and a half ago. You had a massive crescendo of selling, huge volumes, which usually or very often marks the bottom of a market. And then we got huge buying yesterday, which is another good sign. So, a brave person would pick this as the bottom based on that volume and based on the price action and say, well, look how, if I buy it now, look how far it's got to go. Because the peak back in 2018 for that stock was 480 and it's currently at 140. So, there could be enormous profits for the brave, as they say.
Or the imbeciles. No, but TUI is. I think TUI is the worst performer of all, isn't it? It's like it's for. In fact, if you go back, it was in fact pretty similar, I suppose, on percentage. It was at 18 quid in 2018. It's now at 437. But again, these stocks, I think not today, but wait for a pull down day if you're an investor. Okay, may trickle a little bit in there because I think over the next year or so, the leisure, hospitality, and travel sectors are going to get stronger. I think but you've got to be aware that they've got to have a strong business beforehand, because if they've piled up and taken on lots of debt, and they can't get back to growth, then it's going to be worrying for them.
Exactly, and it also depends so much on what governments decide to do in terms of bailouts or loans, or how much leeway are they going to give these companies to recover. I suspect that governments, particularly when it comes to their kind of flag-carrying airlines, are going to want to try and support them. But there might be strong pressure from voters to not bail out big companies. So while these companies are trying to get back on their feet and pay off some of those huge debts that they've built up, it all kind of depends. They're at the mercy of the governments to some degree, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a tricky one. I hate that. I hate trading based on what governments may or may not decide to do, because you can't
avoid those sectors. Then I never. I would never take positions in like betting stocks or anything like that, because I think there are regulations against them. And also cigarette companies. I just think regulation is in the long term against you. And by the way, you called it right with Biden, or have you?
Oh yes, that's right. I forgot I called that. I called it. Glen Goodman, you heard it here first on the podcast. Biden's going to win.
I'd have forced you. I'd have forced you. To be fair, didn't I?
You did force me. And to be fair, I said there's only a marginal. I only put him marginally ahead of Trump, which actually turned out to be the truth, didn't it? He only was marginally ahead of Trump, even though the polls were saying that he was way ahead of Trump. I thought it was almost too close to call because of the shy Trump voters that we were talking about, who did indeed turn out for him. Biden, I mean, he's almost certain, isn't he, now, despite all the court cases that William Barr is hoping to bring, the Attorney General is hoping to bring. He says based on substantial evidence of fraud, and yet he still hasn't really revealed this substantial evidence of fraud. And believe me, I'm keeping an open mind. So every allegation of fraud I've seen from Trump or anyone else, I've been, Googling away, looking into it, trying to find out if there's any substance to it. So far, not a lot of substance. I got to say, there's
stop. But that won't stop Trump, will it? He doesn't care about him, and Mr. Fact are not good friends. Literally, Trump campaign sues to block Pennsylvania from certifying Biden's victory in the state. That's trending right now on pretty Twitter. So he'll keep cracking on with it, won't he? Literally, he's the ultimate in delusion, Trump, and it's got him a long way. You've got to have a deluded ego to get what he's got, and he completely believes himself. He doesn't care about the facts.
It was a messed up election, surely. What a mess.
Yeah, but
you can't blame him, look
at Netflix. Netflix unexplained.
But you can't blame some people for being sceptical and thinking this is just ridiculous. It took days and days and days. Trump was ahead for ages. Then suddenly he was absolutely not ahead, and Biden was ahead. And yes, I know that that's because of the mail-in vote. And yes, I know that's because Trump actually actively discouraged his voters from doing mailing in because he thought it was dodgy. And so you were bound to get more Democrats mailing in than Republicans. But even having said all that, if you're of a conspiratorial frame of mind, you're bound to look at all of that and just go, this isn't a proper election, is it? It's like some banana republic election where it takes days and days to count the votes and suddenly they all turn around and go the opposite direction that they had been. It's, if you look at it from the outside, it doesn't look clean. Well, and yet, as I say, you look into the substance of the allegations, and there is very little substance that's actually come out so far. And that's important, because if this was a multi-county, multi-state conspiracy by the Democrats, then surely there would be serious traces, serious evidence, serious whistleblowers all over the place, because there would be hundreds of people involved, and you can't keep something like that quiet. That's my final word.
Right. I just think if you look at I'm watching this good series again, and it's explained on Netflix, even by I think it's pro-Democrats a little bit, but just the voting system over there is nuts, and every state is different. The timelines in which you can count votes and postal votes, it's all different because it's federal. And you think, why didn't you, and even down a county level, you think, why didn't you have one, unified sort of rule about voting in America? It's just nuts. It's a bit odd, I think.
That's like saying, why don't you have one unified country that's not federalised into 50 states?
But voting is such an essential part of democracy, isn't it? Cornerstone of democracy. You think at least you'd have one set of rules that everyone has to adhere to, rather than having a mishmash of different things, different timelines. Where you think, what have they got fraud? Have they? They don't, because they're at different timelines. They can vote. They can be counted 4 days after. In Florida, they don't start until the actual is finished, or they start counting, as it's going on. When is the deadline for certain? It's just odd, I just think. Of course, it's going to be a mismatch of because you can argue that what's good for one state is not good for another state, and all this stuff. It's just nuts, really.
It is. And which party has actually even got an incentive to change that system? Because obviously the Democrats won now under this system, so a lot of them will be not that keen to change the system because it's just worked for them. And likewise, the Republicans have done a lot of gerrymandering in recent years. Just tweaking the boundaries of individual counties, individual states, in order to give themselves slight electoral advantages here and there. And that has worked pretty well for them in terms of getting votes from the Electoral College over recent years. So the Republicans might not be that keen to change the system either. It would take a third party, I guess, to come in and say, look, this just isn't working. And there is no strong third party in America, unfortunately.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else with Bitcoin? Anything else?
There have been a few big stories, actually. And any other week, we would have been talking about these stories, but obviously bigger things are happening. You might have seen that $1 billion worth of dodgy Bitcoin was found. Basically, a wallet with 69,000 Bitcoins in, worth about $1 billion. This money was made on the Silk Road marketplace. You may remember that from some years ago. It was shut down. It was a dodgy online marketplace where people would buy drugs and guns and all kinds of bad things. And it was using Bitcoin as its currency. And it was shut down. But a lot of the Bitcoin was stuck in this wallet. And hadn't been moved for years and years because it couldn't be accessed. Nobody knew the password, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly it moved. And as soon as the Bitcoin was moved from one place to another, the law enforcement were able to zero in and try and find out, at which they did succeed in doing, who had actually moved that Bitcoin. Because as I've said many times before, it's actually a bit of a myth that Bitcoin is anonymous. There are clever ways of finding out in many, many cases, who actually owns the stuff. And when it's moved is always a good time to start looking for the traces, as clever law enforcement do. Turns out it was a hacker who was moving, who'd managed to get into this wallet and had moved the Bitcoin, and then the police just tracked the hacker And that's all we know so far. But they're luring for the American forces. They got that billion. What are they going to do with it? Who knows? But
hackers, What's the way? Why do they exist? Who gives them? I don't see. There shouldn't be any jobs for hackers. Who's advertising these jobs?
Well, there's the black hat hackers and there's the white hat hackers, isn't it?
Well, let's not be racist. Hackers are all hackers, aren't they?
The black hat, the
what?
Yeah, they're bound to change those terms soon, aren't they? It does sound a bit dodgy in this current era that we're in. I hope I don't get cancelled just for saying that on this podcast. But you've got your naughty hackers and you've got your nice hackers, and often the nice hackers are the ones who used to be naughty hackers, but then went over to the what do you call it? The rebel forces from the dark side.
Have you ever been introduced like that? Hello, this is Glenn. He's a nice hacker. No, not a hacker. I'm a trader. And you, same kind of thing. Same kind of thing, really, isn't it? No, I'm a
not
trader.
Really. Yeah.
Well, you do dodgy things on the internet for money.
Yeah, all right, I do that. So let's move on to quickly because there's a couple of
1 minute.
quick
Come on,
stories.
quick,
1 minute, right? All right. There was a Forbes article you might have seen because I tweeted this Forbes article that I was quoted in a couple of times talking about how it's good that the price of Bitcoin has risen so much in the way that it has, because the guy from Forbes contacted me to ask, what do you think of the fact? Is it bad that when you look at Google Trends data, where you search for keywords on the internet, that the word Bitcoin is not being searched for any more than it was months ago, whereas during the Bitcoin boom of 2017, there was a massive rise, as you'd imagine, in Google searches for the word Bitcoin and similar words. And again in 2019, when the price was rising strongly to around about $14,000, there was a big rise then. Not this time. And I said, you know what? That's a really good thing, because it means that we haven't got the sort of the surge of retail traders, which usually marks the peak of a market. You know what I mean? Just before it starts crashing, they're the so-called weak hands of the market, the people who buy late and then panic sell as soon as things don't look quite so good. We haven't got this going on. We've got a big rise in the price of Bitcoin, but it's happening in a stealthy way. It's happening through institutional buying from the likes of legendary trader Stan Druckenmiller, who said this week that he owns some, and also legendary trader Bill Miller, no relation to Druckenmiller. Why would there be?
All the
different
Millers.
surnames?
Yeah, no, exactly, yes.
And he's recommending it as well. So it's like, all this institutional stuff is happening. The big guys are getting in there, but the little guys, not so much at the moment, which is good. It means that this could be, for a change, a slow, sustainable rise, I'm hoping, rather than, a big thing. I'm pretty little, yeah. I'm a little guy. I think that's
definitely more adoption by the big money and institutions, isn't there? Slowly but surely. And I've missed out on the rise here.
Sorry, one last quick thing, because Rishi Sunak, he tweeted about coins yesterday, about digital currencies. I mean, how much more mainstream do you want? You got Rishi Sunak doing it. He says,
we will publish...
Possibly. He says, we will publish a consultation to ensure new privately issued currencies, stable coins, meet the high standards we expect of other payment methods. And the Bank of England and Treasury are considering if central banks can issue their own digital currencies as a complement to cash. So, he's jumping on the old bandwagon there. Bit late, Rishi. I've been doing this stuff for years, and now old latecomer Rishi's trying to be all cool by getting in on the cool coin stuff.
I wonder who's in more though, him or you?
Well, isn't he married to a billionaire or something?
Yeah.
I think his wife's yeah, I know. That is the way to do it, isn't it?
Listen, Glenn,
I married someone poor.
Glenn, that's enough now. No more chat. Okay, that's it.
All right.
Speak you next weeky.
Okay,
it's time for the top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours. There are 5. Lloyds Banking Group. Bit of a change here in the followers. Up 2.4% to 31.52. At 4, it's IAG, again up big time from yesterday. Big rise yesterday, and it's up again today, 7%, 139. Looks like these banking, leisure, hospitality stocks are taking over. Cineworld at 3, up 30%, to 52.68. At 2, Rolls-Royce up 10%, 110 or 111 now. But number 1 is Novacyt, big fall yesterday. Of course, down, just under 1% to 6.99. In fact, half of 1% now, just changed. But big fall. But that's the king of the testing stocks, like I discussed. It's got cash, it's made cash. There are testing stocks out there that hasn't made any cash, and they haven't even got a test out there yet. There you go. Okay, top 5 most liked RNSs. Let's look at some most read as well. Just get that up as well. Okay, it is. Let me just move this across. Sorry, my tabs are all over the place. At 5, it's Cadence Minerals, share purchase agreement. At 4, Equals Group, B2B payments agreement with HomeSend. Feedback, selected for Digital Health London 2020 programme. Braveheart Group, further update, Peritech Play. And the most is Union Jack Oil as well, one of the most viewed. Bicycle Thought proposed sidewell planning update. And the most viewed is Glen Gold, notice of AGM annual report. Really boring. That's it for the podcast. Thanks for listening. Muchos appreciated.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.